Welcome to Snail Story, where slow-paced tales gently touch the deepest corners of your heart. Today, we invite you to step into a journey that began as nothing more than a cold transaction between two business minds. A marriage contract signed for the sake of corporate interests, but one that unexpectedly unfolded into an emotional journey neither of them ever imagined. Amid calculations, betrayals, and ambition, can love truly take root? Can cold clauses written on paper transform into a real home? Let's dive into the story, from a marriage contract to true love. And don't forget to prepare yourself a warm cup of tea, find a quiet little corner. Let's begin. The golden glow of sunset bathed the glass towers of Manhattan, reflecting across the Hudson River like shimmering ribbons of diamonds. At this very hour, Nicholas Sterling should have been basking in the joy of preparing for the most anticipated wedding of the year among the city's elite, but reality had dealt him a much harsher hand. Inside a private boardroom on the top floor of Sterling Global Properties, Nicholas stood motionless, his steel-gray eyes as cold as ice. Beside him lay the contract terminating his engagement, freshly placed on the table by his lawyer. Across from him sat the woman he once trusted, Amelia Cole. So, this was nothing but a game to you, wasn't it? His voice was low, but the restrained fury simmering beneath threatened to erupt. Amelia pressed her lips together, avoiding his gaze. Though wrapped in a designer dress, she couldn't hide the unease written all over her face. Nick, I only did it because my family was in trouble. I never thought it would go this far. Nicholas let out a dry, bitter laugh. You never thought? You sold confidential Phoenix Project files to our competitor, Northwell Consortium, while still wearing my engagement ring. And you have the nerve to say you never thought? Amelia's face paled. She opened her mouth to respond, but Nicholas coldly raised his hand to silence her. This wedding ends here. I'll announce the cancellation immediately. The news of their broken engagement spread like wildfire. Every major outlet and financial news channel ran headlines. Sterling Global faces turmoil ahead of merger. Nicholas Sterling calls off engagement. Stocks plummet. Billion-dollar wedding scandal. What's happening behind the scenes? Sterling Global's stock lost nearly 15% in just 48 hours. The board of directors swiftly called for an emergency meeting. In the grand walnut-paneled conference room, the cool white lighting only heightened the palpable tension. Alexander Morgan, a major shareholder and senior advisor, sat firmly at the head of the table, his seasoned eyes sharply studying Nicholas's every expression. Nick, this time you've stirred up quite a storm. Alexander's voice was calm, not reproachful, but carried undeniable weight. I chose the truth over a fabricated marriage, Nicholas replied, his shoulders squared, his gaze unwavering. Another board member interjected, But the shareholders don't care about the truth, Nicholas. They want stability. You are the face of this corporation, and now the entire financial ecosystem is questioning Sterling Global's crisis management. Nicholas subtly clenched his fingers, holding back the pressure mounting inside. He knew, full well. In the ruthless world of business, emotions were a luxury no one could afford. Alexander folded his arms, staring directly at Nicholas. If you don't rebuild your image and restore market confidence quickly, your position as CEO may very well be on the table. A faint wry smile played on Nicholas's lips, barely concealing the heavy weight behind it. I understand. That night, alone in his penthouse overlooking the city, Nicholas sank into his sofa, a glass of whiskey slowly swirling between his fingers. Outside, New York's glittering lights continued to twinkle in splendor, but inside him was nothing but a cold, desolate void. He had never imagined that one misplaced trust could shake the empire he had spent 10 years building so violently. His phone vibrated softly. It was Alexander. I have a solution to this crisis, Nick, came Alexander's steady voice. But you'll need to agree to a very different kind of deal. Nicholas closed his eyes. With Alexander there was never such a thing as a humane solution, only transactions that served a purpose. I'm listening. Alexander paused before continuing. A new strategic marriage, swift, clean, and calculated, and I already have the perfect candidate in mind. Nicholas frowned slightly. Who? A knowing smile curled on Alexander's lips on the other end of the line. Sophia Bennett. On an early autumn morning, a thin veil of mist hung over the Manhattan skyline, while sunlight filtered between soaring towers. Gleaming off the glass facade of Bennett Atelier, the interior architecture firm that Sophia Bennett had poured her heart into for the past 7 years. Inside her office on the 28th floor, Sophia meticulously reviewed the final design blueprint for a luxury resort project in the Maldives. Her soft brown hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her deep blue eyes reflected the sunlight, calm yet shadowed by a quiet, persistent anxiety. For months, Bennett Atelier had been under mounting pressure from major conglomerates eager to acquire it. Foreign investment funds offered tempting deals, but beneath the surface were traps designed to strip her of control over the company she had fought so hard to build. Sophia knew, one wrong move, and years of sacrifice would vanish in an instant. A gentle knock broke the silence. Her personal assistant, Natalie, stepped in carefully, holding a black envelope with a silver sheen. Miss Bennett, Mr. Alexander. Morgan has requested a private meeting with you this afternoon at the Sterling Club. Sophia's brows furrowed slightly. Alexander Morgan, the firm's strategic investor, its largest shareholder, and also a major stakeholder in Sterling Global, had never requested a personal meeting like this before. Did he mention why? Sophia asked. Natalie shook her head softly. He only said it concerns your future directly. That afternoon, Sophia entered the private negotiation room at the Sterling Club, a space reserved for the highest echelons of power and deal-making. Alexander Morgan was already seated, poised in a charcoal suit, a glass of cognac resting quietly in his hand. Behind him, the city glittered through the panoramic windows like a stage of endless lights. Sophia, he greeted her with a voice smooth yet weighted with power. Thank you for coming. Good afternoon, Mr. Morgan. I must admit I'm curious about your proposal. Alexander smiled, the sharp glint of calculation flickering behind his eyes. You're a clever woman, so I'll be direct. Bennett Atelier's position has grown precarious. The foreign funds may appear inviting, but behind them lie financial giants waiting to strip you of your founder's stake. Sophia's fingers tightened slightly, though her gaze remained steady. I'm fully aware of that, Mr. Morgan, but rest assured I have no intention of allowing anyone to seize control of Bennett Atelier. Alexander let out a faint chuckle. You may have the will, but do you have the strength? You stand alone, Sophia. And I would hate to see someone with your talent get swallowed in a game as ruthless as this. Silence fell between them, the tension pressing heavier against Sophia's chest. Setting his glass down, Alexander leaned forward, his gaze probing, deep as if trying to read the very depths of her mind. However, I have a solution that could benefit both you and Nicholas Sterling. He paused deliberately, weighing each word. A strategic marriage. Sophia froze. Marriage? She echoed softly, almost questioning if she'd heard him correctly. Alexander nodded calmly. Yes. Sterling Global's stock is spiraling after Nicholas's broken engagement. The board desperately needs a stable public image to restore investor confidence. Meanwhile, Bennett Atelier requires a solid shield against these predatory acquisition attempts. He let the words sink in before concluding, You marry Nicholas. Both sides stand to gain. Sophia bit her lip, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. But Nicholas and we've never even had a private conversation. Alexander smiled knowingly. Then it's time you start. That evening, Sophia sat silently on the balcony of her apartment, a cup of tea long gone cold resting before her. The Manhattan skyline still sparkled like an extravagant stage, but her heart was a whirlwind of uncertainty. Marriage. To a complete stranger? In exchange for control over the company she had nurtured like a child for years? And protection from the wolves circling around her? She was no fool. In the business world, sometimes cold agreements were the only means of survival. After a sleepless night, Sophia finally dialed Alexander's number. I accept, under one condition. Her voice was steady. Alexander raised an eyebrow on the other end of the line. I'm listening. I want the marriage contract to have clear boundaries. 2 years, and my professional work will remain fully independent. Alexander chuckled, pleased. Very smart. I'll arrange the first meeting between the two of you tomorrow. And as if fate had already scripted their paths, the following morning, inside the private boardroom of Sterling Global, Sophia Bennett and Nicholas Sterling sat face to face for the very first time. Their eyes met, and in those few seconds, both recognized something immediately. Sitting across from them was not someone weak, not someone needing rescue, but an equal, intelligent, dangerous, and fiercely capable. The boardroom on the 50th floor of Sterling Global exuded the same cold precision as its owner. Abstract paintings lined the walls, while soft white lighting reflected off the expansive glass table. Here, Sophia Bennett and Nicholas Sterling faced each other for the first time, inside a space as elegant as it was suffocating, like a chessboard where their fates were about to be determined. Nicholas spoke first. His voice was deep, steady, and void of emotion. Miss Bennett, I trust Alexander has already outlined the proposal. Sophia sat upright, her blue eyes gleaming with sharpness. Quite clearly, but I prefer to hear it directly from you. After all, we are the two primary parties to this contract. Nicholas allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile, one that carried no warmth. I need a marriage that will pacify the board, stabilize stock value, and safeguard Sterling Global's public image. You, on the other hand, need a shield, strong enough to protect Bennett Atelier from the vultures circling your company. Sophia nodded. And you need a wife intelligent enough to keep your corporate secrets buried. Precisely, Nicholas replied, his gaze never leaving hers. Across the table, Marcus, Nicholas's personal attorney, gently slid a thick stack of documents toward Sophia. The contract has been drafted thoroughly, Miss Bennett. Every clause is clear, protecting the interests and boundaries of both parties. Sophia picked up the file, her eyes swiftly scanning each page. Term: 24 months. Public appearances: mandatory for official events. Confidentiality: absolute secrecy regarding the true nature of the marriage. Business independence: no interference in each other's professional affairs. Post-termination: no financial obligations once the contract concludes. Notably, no emotional involvement required. Her eyes paused briefly on that final clause, her lips pressing into a thin line. Emotions. From the very beginning, both sides had agreed to strip them out entirely. They had seen enough of how fragile emotions could be in the ruthless world, a power they both inhabited. Is there anything you wish to amend? Nicholas asked, his sharp gaze reading her every subtle reaction. Sophia looked up, her tone even. I want to add one clause: full immunity for Bennett Atelier from any oversight, interference, or control by Sterling Global, even during the course of this marriage. Marcus glanced quickly at Nicholas, but Nicholas, without hesitation, nodded. Agreed. I have no desire to control your business. Sophia met his eyes directly. Then we have an agreement. Nicholas extended his hand toward her. His touch was cold, but his gesture firm and decisive. Welcome to our arrangement, Miss Bennett. Sophia reached forward and shook his hand. Cold, solid, like two business titans sealing a multi-billion-dollar deal. 3 weeks later, New York's elite once again found itself swept into a frenzy over another high-profile wedding. Barely 2 months after Nicholas's engagement scandal had rocked the headlines, the media quickly coined it Destiny's Turn, from scandal to power couple. Nicholas Sterling, the tycoon CEO, marries Sophia Bennett, the interior design queen. The wedding was held inside the rooftop glass garden of the Sterling Royal Hotel, one of the crown jewels in Nicholas's vast real estate empire. Paparazzi swarmed the venue. Every calculated smile, every poised gesture was performed flawlessly, as if this were indeed a marriage born of love. Sophia wore an ivory satin gown, minimal yet elegant, perfectly reflecting her bold, independent nature. Nicholas, in a masterfully tailored black tuxedo, stood beside her, his face calm and unreadable as always. When the officiant asked, "Do you, Nicholas Sterling, take Sophia Bennett to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Nicholas responded with steady resolve. "I do." Sophia answered without hesitation, her eyes unwavering. "I do." Camera flashes erupted like fireworks. Rings were exchanged. A ceremonial kiss was shared. Every detail executed with the precision of a script rehearsed down to the last moment. Yet deep in both their eyes, an unspoken truth remained. This was merely the beginning of a calculated contract. Nothing more, or at least that's what they believed. The penthouse atop Sterling Tower stood quietly amid the dazzling heart of Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls framed the glittering cityscape, its sea of lights resembling millions of stars scattered across an artificial galaxy. Yet within this stunning space, the air between the newlyweds remained suffocatingly cold. Their wedding night passed with a simplicity bordering on indifference. No rose petals scattered on silk sheets, no champagne bubbling in crystal flutes, no lingering glances of desire like those told in fairy tales. Only 2 suitcases neatly arranged by hotel staff, and 2 people quietly retreating into separate bedrooms. Sophia stood by the window, watching the endless streams of traffic far below, flowing like rivers of light. Her dark brown hair cascaded softly down her shoulders, the wedding gown now replaced by a simple cream-colored silk nightdress. In the stillness of the room, the ticking clock echoed, accentuating the strange solitude she never imagined she would feel on the very first night of her marriage. In the room next door, Nicholas sat in his expansive study, swirling a glass of whiskey between his fingers. His steel-gray eyes were fixed on the endless rows of financial data streaming across his laptop screen. Sleep was unnecessary. At least for tonight, a decade of navigating high-stakes deals had conditioned him to function under pressure like breathing air, marriage, contract, commitment. They were familiar words in his world, a businessman's world where emotions were a costly luxury. The days that followed unfolded with mechanical precision. Each morning, Sophia rose early to share breakfast with Nicholas at exactly the time set by their assistants. They exchanged polite pleasantries, maintaining just enough closeness to fuel the illusion for media cameras. "How's breakfast today, Sophia?" Nicholas asked in his courteous tone. "Good, thank you," she replied with a soft smile, adjusting her coffee cup ever so slightly. "We have the Hamptons Resort launch event tonight. Marcus will send you the schedule," Nicholas informed her, his voice calm and businesslike as always. "Yes," Sophia nodded, already accustomed to meticulously planned schedules where every move was calculated under public scrutiny. After breakfast, they each disappeared into their respective worlds. Nicholas dove into board meetings, merger negotiations, and billion-dollar acquisitions. Sophia returned to her office at Bennett Atelier, overseeing international design projects that continued to expand. Though they lived under one roof, every evening they retreated into parallel worlds. Nicholas to his private library, Sophia to the balcony where she worked quietly beneath the city's glowing skyline. More than once Sophia wondered if this silence was truly something to regret. Their agreement was crystal clear. No emotions, no attachments. Everything was operating exactly as they had both designed. Yet sometimes, late at night, she found herself glancing toward Nicholas's door, waiting for something. What, even she couldn't quite name. Nicholas, too, was not blind to the invisible emptiness creeping between them. On some nights, he found himself standing before Sophia's door, lingering, only to turn away without ever raising his hand to knock. He had long believed himself immune to emotions after everything that had unfolded with Amelia, the betrayal, the manipulation, the feeling of being reduced to a pawn in someone else's game of ambition. It had shut his heart away for years. But Sophia was different. She asked for no love. She did not cling to his wealth, nor seek glory from this paper marriage. She focused solely on her work, calm, poised, and fiercely independent. And it was precisely this difference that made her more unpredictable than any financial deal Nicholas had ever negotiated. At a formal dinner in the Hamptons, as the media clamored to capture every perfect moment of the powerful couple, Sophia and Nicholas performed their roles flawlessly. Yet that night, once the lights had faded and the car carried them home, an unusual stillness filled the air. Unexpectedly, Nicholas spoke, his voice softer than usual. "Aren't you tired?" "We haven't had a single moment to rest today," Sophia looked at him, slightly surprised by his first genuine question since they married. "A little," she admitted with a faint smile, "but I've grown used to it." Nicholas paused, his eyes dropping as if weighing something unspoken. Finally, he exhaled quietly. "If there's anything about this arrangement that troubles you, you can always tell me." Sophia held his gaze longer than usual. Her voice softened as well. "We both entered this arrangement with clear minds, Nicholas. I have no complaints." Then she paused, her eyes glimmering with a quiet emotion she herself barely recognized. "And you?" Nicholas turned his gaze toward the window where the city lights streaked across the glass like rivers of stars. Tonight he gave no answer. Somewhere within that silence, something fragile had begun to take root, not with sweet promises, but with pauses, with fleeting glances filled with unspoken thought, emotions neither dared to name, at least, not yet. A soft autumn breeze drifted across the wide balcony of the penthouse, carrying the gentle scent of lavender from the pots Sophia had planted with her own hands. She stood silently, a steaming cup of tea in her hand. Her eyes gazed into the star-strewn night sky, yet her mind swirled with quiet contradictions she had yet to resolve. It had been nearly 3 months since the marriage contract was signed. Everything had unfolded exactly as planned. They appeared regularly before the media, becoming the golden couple in the public eye. Sterling Global's stock had stabilized. Bennett Atelier had expanded into 3 new international branches, supported indirectly by Nicholas's influence. But it was precisely this cold perfection that slowly unsettled Sophia's heart. She couldn't help but notice the small things. How Nicholas always pulled out her chair at dinner, how her favorite tea was always waiting for her each morning, or how his occasional glances seemed to hold something unspoken. Nicholas, though outwardly composed and businesslike, had begun to feel unfamiliar stirrings within himself, ones he hadn't anticipated. Sophia was unlike any woman he had ever known. She sought no protection, craved no spotlight, and asked for nothing from his wealth. Calm, independent, and unshakably poised, she at times made him feel as if he were the one being observed. One quiet weekend evening, when the relentless pace of their schedules briefly paused, Nicholas did something he hadn't done once in the past 3 months. He knocked on Sophia's door. Sophia opened it, slightly surprised to find him standing there, holding 2 glasses of red wine. "May I come in for a few minutes?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Sophia offered a faint smile and stepped aside to welcome him. Her room, though simple, exuded the refined elegance of her own design. Nicholas set the glasses down on the small balcony table, pulling out her chair with unhurried grace. They sat across from each other, surrounded by soft lighting and the quiet whisper of the wind among the potted plants. "I've realized," Nicholas began, eyes watching the slow swirl of wine in his glass, "that though we share a home, we've barely spoken, truly spoken." Sophia let out a quiet laugh. "We have a very efficient contract, after all." "Efficient, yes, but cold," Nicholas answered candidly. She fell silent, observing his face bathed in the warm glow of the lamps. For the first time she sensed that beneath the polished surface of the steel CEO was a man still carrying unhealed scars. Nicholas lifted his gaze, meeting hers. "I know you had your reasons for entering this marriage, as did I. But sometimes I wonder if we're not wasting something far more valuable." Sophia was taken aback by his openness. She hadn't expected Nicholas to be the one to venture, beyond the boundaries of their contract. Lowering her glass slightly, she looked him directly in the eye. "And what exactly are you referring to?" Nicholas paused for a moment before answering softly. "Trust." After that night, small but significant shifts began to emerge between them. Breakfasts grew less stiff, with light conversations about hobbies and daily routines gradually filling the silence. Sophia was surprised to discover Nicholas's private fascination with abstract art, something he had never shared publicly. Likewise, Nicholas learned that Sophia walked Central Park each morning to observe how early sunlight danced across the buildings, an endless wellspring of inspiration for her designs. A growing curiosity about each other quietly crept into their late-night conversations after events and joint business trips where they played the role of the perfect couple. During one such short trip to Miami, after a long day of investor meetings, Nicholas unexpectedly suggested, "Care for a walk? The beach is quite peaceful at night." Sophia raised an eyebrow but nodded. They strolled slowly along the moonlit shoreline, the rhythmic waves whispering beneath the brilliant night sky. For a long while, neither spoke, until Sophia finally broke the silence. "You don't strike me as someone who enjoys late night, walks on the beach." Nicholas chuckled softly, eyes fixed on the dark ocean ahead. "Maybe I'm only just learning to try things I never considered before." Sophia turned to face him, their eyes locking beneath the moonlight. In that moment, the invisible distance between them grew fragile, almost transparent. Nicholas slowly reached out, gently brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His voice lowered, deeper, steadier. "And perhaps I'm also learning how to trust someone again." Sophia felt her heartbeat falter for a brief second. She said nothing, allowing his hand to linger gently on her skin, her eyes softening with words unspoken but deeply felt. That night, for the first time since signing the contract, sleep evaded both of them. Within the cold legal framework they once drafted, something fragile yet sweet had begun to take root, quietly slipping through cracks they had once sworn would never exist. Winter arrived in Manhattan with a quiet chill. Thin snowflakes drifted gently over the towering rooftops, blanketing the city in a pristine white like delicate silk scarves draped across glass and steel. Yet within the vast penthouse atop Sterling Tower, a fragile warmth had begun to creep into the hearts of two people who once believed themselves immune to love. Since their trip to Miami, the conversations between Nicholas and Sophia were no longer forced. They had grown accustomed to each other's presence in the most ordinary moments. Breakfasts often stretched a few minutes longer as they exchanged light-hearted talk about the weather or their shared, unexpected fondness for jazz. Sophia realized she had slowly come to enjoy Nicholas's presence, the way he quietly placed her favorite chamomile tea on the table each morning, the calm focus in his eyes when she spoke about her new design concepts. And Nicholas, the man who had long appeared indifferent, found himself paying attention to the smallest details about Sophia. The soft shade of lipstick she preferred, the way she furrowed her brows while thinking, the subtle smile she wore when reading on the balcony at night. One weekend evening, as Manhattan welcomed its first heavy snowfall of the season, the entire city glistened beneath its sparkling white cloak. For once, their schedules allowed a rare evening at home. No events, no interviews, no cameras. Nicholas stepped onto the balcony where Sophia stood, cradling a cup of hot cocoa, her gaze fixed on the falling snow. "It's beautiful," she murmured softly, sensing his approach. Nicholas stood beside her, his eyes also taking in the glowing skyline. "Winter makes everything seem more peaceful than it really is," he said in his deep voice, though this time it carried a softness, a nearness rarely heard before. Sophia turned slightly to face him. In the warm balcony lights, Nicholas's face held a tenderness she rarely witnessed since the day they met. "I used to fear winter," she whispered, "because it often brings fragile things, like emotions." Nicholas gazed at her for a long while. His eyes seemed to search the depths of her mind, as if wrestling between logic and feeling. Sophia, he said her name gently, his voice carrying unspoken weight. She lifted her face to meet his eyes, her blue irises shimmering beneath the soft glow. In that moment, the distance between them vanished. Only warm breaths and quiet, racing heartbeats remained. Nicholas slowly reached out, his fingers lightly brushing her chilled cheek. She didn't pull away, nor did she speak, surrendering instead to the current rising between them. Their gazes dropped briefly to each other's lips. In that instant, the marriage contract faded entirely from their minds. And then, their first kiss, soft, tentative, as though too much pressure might make it vanish like snowflakes melting upon a hand. Yet it was that very tenderness that deepened the kiss, making it more real, more honest. Sophia trembled, not from the cold, but from the unexpected surge of desire she never thought herself capable of feeling. Nicholas gently drew her closer, by the waist, as though afraid to lose the fragile moment he never thought he'd experience again. When their lips parted, only breathless silence and tender, searching glances remained, both slightly startled by the waves they had just awakened. It was Sophia who whispered first, her voice barely audible, a quiet confession. "We shouldn't have." Nicholas softly brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, his voice lowering. "I know, but I can't stop anymore, Sophia." That night, for the first time since signing their contract, both lay restless in their own beds. Sophia stared at the ceiling, her heart in turmoil. She never imagined her heart would so easily betray her carefully guarded logic. Fear stirred inside her. Fear of these growing emotions that their contract had once tried so hard to suppress. And Nicholas, the man who once prided himself on controlling everything, now realized the cold walls he'd built for years were slowly being dismantled, piece by Sophia. In the days that followed, though both tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, neither truly succeeded. Their eyes met more often, their hands brushed more easily, each touch carrying a warmth that was impossible to ignore. The contract still existed, but the fragile line between duty and desire was blurring little by little. The January air in Manhattan cut like a blade, but the true storm looming over Nicholas and Sophia had nothing to do with winter winds. It came from the ruthless calculations quietly unfolding behind the scenes. The media still buzzed with admiration for the powerful financial architecture couple. Sterling Global stood stronger than ever. Bennett Atelier had just secured 2 major international contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, successfully expanding into the European market. Everything seemed too perfect until a familiar name resurfaced: Amelia Cole. Amelia, Nicholas's former fiancée, reappeared like an unhealed wound suddenly ripped open. After last year's betrayal scandal, she had vanished from public view, quietly aligning herself with old rivals of Sterling Global. Now, just as Nicholas seemed to have regained everything, Amelia struck at the exact moment when the damage would be most devastating. One morning, while Sophia was reviewing the design drafts for a new resort in Santorini, her assistant Natalie rushed into the room, her face tense. "Miss Bennett, there's a situation." Sophia looked up, her heart tightening at Natalie's uneasy expression. "What happened?" Natalie placed her iPad on the desk. The screen displayed a flood of breaking headlines. Contract marriage? Shocking evidence. Exposed about Nicholas Sterling and Sophia Bennett. Marriage contract leak. Was the billion-dollar union all a calculated deal? Beneath the headlines was a photograph of the very contract, fully signed by both Nicholas and Sophia, a document that only 3 people had ever seen: Nicholas, Sophia, and Nicholas's attorney, Marcus. Sophia froze. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the familiar clauses. Their contract. How did this get leaked?" she whispered. Natalie bit her lip. "Rumors say it was leaked by Amelia Cole. The media is going wild." That afternoon, inside the emergency boardroom meeting at Sterling Global, Nicholas faced a board more furious than ever. Alexander Morgan sat at the head of the table, his expression grave. "Nick, this is far more serious than you realize," he said in a lowered voice, though barely containing his frustration. "The marriage contract has been leaked. Shareholders are panicking. They fear the company could face investigations for manipulating its public image and market value." Another board member slammed his hand on the table. "This is shareholder deception, Nicholas. Our stock is under threat by the hour." Nicholas sat upright, his steel-gray eyes unwavering. Though his heart raged beneath the surface, not a flicker of emotion showed on his face. "We can explain everything," he stated firmly. "Can you?" Another member challenged harshly. "Even with the contract now in the public domain? Even as people like Amelia Cole are feeding this scandal to the press?" Alexander exhaled deeply, folding his hands together on the table, his gaze cutting into Nicholas. "Nick, if you don't resolve this quickly and decisively, the board may have no choice but to consider replacing you as CEO." Nicholas tightened his grip slightly. Behind his calm exterior, fury boiled, not at the board, but at the one orchestrating it all. Amelia. That evening, in the penthouse, Sophia stood silently in the living room as Nicholas entered, his face wearier than usual. They faced each other beneath the soft glow of the lights. For the first time, the heaviness between them didn't come from cold distance, but from the storm of media frenzy swirling outside their walls. Sophia's voice trembled slightly. "I'm so sorry. It's all because of that contract." Nicholas stepped closer, his voice steady, but filled with resolve. "Don't say that. This isn't your fault. This is Amelia's revenge, aimed at both of us." Sophia looked up, her eyes glistening. "Can we survive this, Nicholas?" He stared at her for a long moment before gently cupping her face in his hands, his eyes revealing emotions he had kept locked away for months. "We will survive, Sophia," he whispered, his voice dropping. "I won't let anyone destroy what we've built, not just a contract, but something far more than that." That night, for the first time since it all began, they slept in the same bed. No more walls, no more contracts, only warmth and two hearts beating side by side against the storm outside. But neither of them knew. The storm was far from over. Amelia, and those working behind her, still had darker cards to play. The sky over Manhattan hung heavy with gray, as if foreshadowing the storm brewing inside the grand tower of Sterling Global. Sophia stepped out of the car, dressed in an elegant yet sharp light blue suit. Her gaze was steady, her lips pressed into a quiet determination. Today, she was not here as a contractual wife, but as a woman ready to defend something she once never dared to believe in: love. Inside the vast boardroom, every seat was filled. Shareholders, attorneys, and PR advisors occupied the polished walnut chairs. Curious, skeptical, and judgmental eyes followed Sophia and Nicholas as they walked in together. At the head of the table, Alexander Morgan sat in silence, his sharp gaze slicing through every unspoken emotion like a blade. Nicholas took his seat, his expression calm and composed. Yet beneath the mask of collected stillness, Sophia knew he was carrying the full weight of his empire, his reputation, and years of hard-earned trust. Alexander's voice broke the silence, deep and commanding. "We are gathered today to address the leaked marriage contract scandal that now threatens the integrity and reputation of Sterling Global." He paused, his gaze shifting directly toward Nicholas and Sophia. "We want a straightforward answer. Was your marriage originally based on a staged contract?" Nicholas began to speak, but Sophia gently placed her hand on his, nodding softly, a silent request, "Let me." The room fell completely silent as Sophia stood. Her voice rang out, steady, unwavering, and filled with conviction. "Yes, esteemed board members. In the beginning, Nicholas and I did enter into a contract, a legal agreement, born from the strategic needs of both our businesses." Whispers spread like ripples across the room. Sophia paused briefly, her eyes scanning every face before her. When she continued, her voice grew stronger, firmer. But that was only the starting point. Over months of sharing life together, beneath the cold structure of business arrangements, we discovered something neither of us expected, something no contract can control: trust, connection, and ultimately, love. A hush fell over the room, heavy and absolute. Sophia turned slightly, her gaze locking onto Nicholas, his eyes filled with both pride and emotion. "You may question the contract, but you cannot deny the truth I'm standing here to defend. We are no longer bound by that agreement. We are husband and wife, genuinely, true partners. And I believe this does not harm Sterling Global, but instead reflects the very stability and transparency this company represents." Alexander leaned back slightly, observing Sophia as if seeing a new version of the woman before him. One far stronger, far bolder. A woman not only willing to defend her love, but capable of defending the financial ecosystem he himself helped build. Finally, Nicholas rose, his voice steady and clear. "I take full responsibility for what has transpired. But I also believe you all can see the company's performance over these past months, even after our marriage began." He reached out and firmly held Sophia's hand before everyone. "Today, I don't ask you to trust only the financial reports. I ask you to trust my judgment, my choice." The room held its breath under the weight of the moment. Then, unexpectedly, Harold, one of the board's most skeptical and outspoken critics, broke the silence after long observation. "All things considered, we cannot deny the numbers Nicholas has cited." He lifted the financial report calmly. "Profits have remained steady. New contracts continue to generate strong cash flow." A few shareholders nodded, the whispers gradually shifting from doubt to consideration. Alexander tapped his finger thoughtfully against the table before delivering his verdict. "My recommendation: Nicholas Sterling will remain as CEO, for now. But the Oversight Committee will exercise closer scrutiny on all related transactions going forward." No one objected. Nicholas quietly exhaled, his chest loosening just slightly. Sophia squeezed his hand tighter, their eyes meeting with a new kind of strength neither had dared reach for before. As they left the boardroom, Sophia and Nicholas paused in the quiet hallway. "You saved both of us today, Sophia," Nicholas whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia gazed at him for a long moment, then smiled. "Not for the contract, Nicholas, for love, and because, for the first time in my life, I wanted to protect the man I love." Nicholas gently pulled her into his embrace, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead in the warmth of a moment hard-won after the storm. For the first time, Sophia fully realized they were no longer two strangers bound by an agreement. They had become each other's safe harbor, even as greater trials still awaited them. For a moment after the shareholders' meeting, it seemed the storm might finally calm. But both Sophia and Nicholas knew better. Their real enemy still lurked behind the curtain. Amelia was not acting alone. Behind her stood a shadow group of investors led by Raymond Carter, Sterling Global's longtime rival. For years, Carter had plotted to seize control of the corporation at any cost. The leaked marriage contract had merely been the opening move in a much larger game designed to topple Nicholas's leadership. Late one evening, inside Nicholas's dimly lit office, Sophia stood beside a large digital board filled with financial charts. Red lines crisscrossed like arteries in the intricate anatomy of a ruthless financial war. "I discovered this while rechecking the shareholder fund movements," Sophia said calmly, but her voice carried a sharp edge. On the screen, transactions traced through shell companies in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore, all leading back to a single name, Raymond Carter's Carter & Co. "Look," Sophia continued, "they've been secretly accumulating Sterling Global shares over the past 3 months, disguised through so-called neutral investment funds. Once they cross the 25% threshold, they'll have enough voting power to trigger a motion to oust you as CEO." Nicholas stared at the numbers in cold silence. A cold sweat formed along his temples. This was no longer mere media manipulation. This was a hostile takeover. "Raymond and Amelia have played this meticulously," Nicholas said, his voice low. They waited until my credibility weakened, the stock price dropped, and then made their move to seize control. Sophia gripped his hand tightly, her eyes unwavering. But we still have time. If we can freeze the next wave of stock purchases and prove market manipulation, the SEC will step in to investigate. Nicholas looked at Sophia with profound pride. This woman, whom he had once viewed merely as a contractual partner, was now standing shoulder to shoulder with him, fighting for his career and their future. The counterattack was launched immediately. Marcus, Nicholas's trusted legal counsel, led the covert legal team to gather evidence. Sophia worked directly with international auditors, tracing the complex financial web Carter's group had woven. The battlefield was no longer press, conferences, or boardrooms, but encrypted data transfers, all-night investigations, and shell company layers that hid illegal trades behind veils of legality. 2 intense weeks passed, pushing everyone to exhaustion. Then, one night at 2 a.m., Marcus knocked on Nicholas's office door, his face lit with triumph. "We have it." He handed over a thick file. Inside was the full flowchart of Carter & Co.'s financial moves, internal transaction records, and most crucially, audio recordings of secret conversations between Raymond and Amelia where they blatantly discussed their plan to take Nicholas down through media smears and stock manipulation. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she held the file, not from fear but from the overwhelming tension that had finally found its release. Nicholas placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with deep gratitude. "We've won, Sophia." The following morning, the entire file was submitted directly to the SEC, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Within 48 hours, federal authorities launched a full-scale investigation into Carter & Co. The media narrative flipped instantly. New headlines flooded every major outlet. Carter & Co. accused of market manipulation and illegal takeover scheme. Financial scandal unfolds. Sterling Global strikes back. Raymond Carter was swiftly suspended from his leadership position. Amelia, once the most dangerous pawn in the game, was also summoned to testify for her collusion. At the next Sterling Global board meeting, the atmosphere had entirely shifted. Alexander Morgan stood, for the first time, showing a hint of public approval as he addressed Nicholas and Sophia. "On behalf of the board, I officially declare that full executive authority will remain with CEO Nicholas Sterling." Applause erupted around the table, this time genuine, not the forced, tense gestures from meetings past. Under the table, Nicholas squeezed Sophia's hand. Their eyes met in a quiet, shared pride. It was not just a financial battle they had overcome, but the greatest test of a relationship that had once started as a cold contract. Sophia leaned in, whispering softly into her husband's ear amid the surrounding congratulations. "At last, we've truly overcome this together." Nicholas smiled, his eyes filled with a tenderness far deeper than when they first met. "And this is only the beginning, Sophia." That spring in Manhattan arrived gently, almost tenderly, as if the city itself understood the final storm had passed. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the Hudson River, dressing the city in soft shades of pink, the color of new beginnings. Inside their familiar penthouse, Sophia stood by the large window, her gaze quietly following the rising sun. A cup of chamomile tea steamed softly in her hands, its fragrance filling every corner of the room. Today was special. Today marked the official end of the contract that had once bound her and Nicholas together. 2 full years, long enough for two strangers to journey from cold signatures on black and white paper to a place where no one even mentioned the contract anymore. Behind her, steady footsteps approached. Nicholas entered, holding a cream-colored envelope. He stood silently for a moment, as if savoring the sight of her, before finally speaking. "Why, contract," he said softly, raising the file slightly, a faint smile playing at his lips. "It officially expires as of this moment." Sophia turned to face him, her eyes lifting to meet his, filled with a warmth she never would have imagined 2 years ago. "So, we're free now," she smiled gently, though a soft tremor laced her voice. Nicholas's gaze deepened. He stepped closer, carefully placed the envelope on the table, and took her hands in his. Sophia. His voice was low, steady, and as warm as the spring breeze outside. Yes, we're free, but I don't want this to be the end. Sophia's eyes widened slightly, her heart quickening as if sensing what was to come. Nicholas drew a deep breath, before suddenly lowering himself to one knee. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box in her favorite sapphire blue. As the box opened, a brilliant diamond sparkled under the morning light, reflecting 1,000 tiny stars into her tearful eyes. "The first time I proposed to you, it was a contract," Nicholas said softly, his eyes filled with honest vulnerability. "But this time, I'm asking you with my entire heart. No papers, no terms, only love and devotion. Sophia Bennett. Will you marry me, truly, fully, for love?" Words failed Sophia. In that moment, every memory, the long nights, the fierce battles, the quiet fears, the tender kisses, the stolen glances, played like a slow reel across her mind. Finally, tears shining, she smiled and whispered, "I do." Nicholas smiled, sliding the ring onto her slender finger. As it settled perfectly, he stood, pulling her into his embrace, holding her tightly as if afraid this beautiful moment might vanish. "Thank you for staying," he whispered. "Thank you for daring to believe in love again," she replied, softly in his arms. Soon after, their true wedding was held in Provence, amidst lavender fields that Sophia had always dreamed of. No press, no media circus, only family, close friends, and those who had witnessed their long and arduous journey. Alexander Morgan, the man who once orchestrated the cold contract, officiated the ceremony. As he offered his blessing, he smiled knowingly. "Business teaches us contracts, but you two have taught us something far greater." Nicholas and Sophia exchanged rings and vows. This time no clauses, only hearts laid bare. Under the sweet, Provençal sunset, accompanied by soft music and lavender-scented air, they shared their first dance as husband and wife, gentle, warm, and full of grace. Months later, Bennett Atelier officially launched its Reborn collection, a symbol of resilience after the storms. Sterling Global continued its steady expansion under Nicholas's leadership. Together, they also founded the Sterling Bennett Foundation, offering scholarships to young talents in architecture and finance. One early summer morning, Nicholas and Sophia walked hand in hand beneath the shady trees of Central Park, the very place where their first real conversations had begun. Sophia leaned gently against his shoulder, whispering, "Sometimes I still can't believe it all started from a contract." Nicholas squeezed her hand softly, smiling, and ended, "With love." They paused beside the shimmering lake, where sunlight danced across the still surface, a silent witness to the extraordinary journey they had written together, from a cold business arrangement into a story of sweet, tender, and profound love that no contract could ever capture. 3 years after their wedding in Provence, Nicholas and Sophia Sterling's life had settled into a peaceful rhythm they once never believed possible. Bennett Atelier had grown into one of the most renowned architectural brands worldwide, known for its sustainable and deeply human designs. Sterling Global remained stronger than ever, though Nicholas had long since learned to step back from the brutal power plays he once chased, choosing instead to spend more time with his little family. Yet the most precious thing they had could never be measured on any business ranking. That autumn, as the trees of the northern countryside blushed in vibrant shades of red and orange, Nicholas drove Sophia away from the city's noise toward a small cabin he had secretly prepared. For months, the house nestled into a lush Vermont hillside, surrounded by endless fields and fiery maple trees as fall arrived. The only sounds were the whispers of wind through the leaves and the faint scent of pine in the cool air. "This is my surprise for you," Nicholas smiled, opening the wooden door. Sophia paused for a moment, taking in the warm scene inside. An oakwood kitchen, a stone fireplace at the center of the living room, and wide windows overlooking the valley below. Every detail was simple, yet exquisite, a reflection of her own essence. "Do you like it?" Nicholas asked, his voice carrying a rare, quiet nervousness. Sophia didn't answer right away. She stepped softly to the window, gazing out at the soft evening sky like a painting. "Honestly," she smiled, turning to him, "I never realized that what I longed for most could be something this simple." Nicholas came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. His breath was warm against her hair. "Me too. After everything, all that remains is you. And this little house." A few months later, on a cold, early winter morning, as the season's first snow blanketed the small garden outside, Sophia brought Nicholas a surprise greater than any contract he had ever signed in his life. In her hand was a small pregnancy test stick with 2 clear red lines. Nicholas froze for a moment, his eyes shimmering with disbelief, as if afraid to trust the happiness before him. "Are you sure?" His voice broke softly. Sophia smiled and nodded slowly, her eyes shining with the same light she had first given him long ago in that penthouse. Complete trust. "We're going to be parents, Nicholas." Nicholas pulled her into his embrace, burying his face in her soft hair. In that moment, he knew that love had finally taught him its greatest lesson, not power, not victory, but building. Building a family, a true home. The following spring, baby Isabel Sterling was born, becoming the sweet final note in the symphony of trials they had journeyed through together. In a world once ruled by contracts, clauses, power, and ambition, Nicholas and Sophia had found something no amount of money could ever negotiate: a sincere love and a home in every sense of the word. The cold contract that had once brought them together was now nothing but a quiet memory. On the mantel above the fireplace in their little house on the hill, Sophia had softly framed the contract and placed it beside a photo of the 3 of them, as a gentle reminder. Sometimes the greatest happiness begins in the places we least expect. Life often leads us into beginnings that seem utterly illogical. A marriage contract, cold clauses, agreements forged solely for the sake of outward stability. Yet when 2 people truly reach beneath the surface, into sincerity, trust, resilience, and courage, those cold boundaries can transform into the very foundation of a mature love. Nicholas and Sophia have shown us that love does not always begin with perfect romance. Sometimes it takes root in the middle of calculation, conflict, and doubt. And it's through the storms, the stumbles, the breaking points, that we learn to cherish tenderness, to find the courage to let go of fear, and to hold on to the person who truly deserves to stand beside us. Perhaps the greatest value of love doesn't lie in the promises made at the start, but in how 2 people choose to stand together through their greatest trials. And so from a contract, they wrote a real-life story far more beautiful than any novel. And so, Nicholas and Sophia's story comes to a close. A journey from a cold contract to a kind of love that no amount of money could ever buy. Sometimes, the most precious things don't come from perfect agreements, but from how 2 people learn to trust, to hold on, and to walk forward together, even after the fiercest storms. If today's story touched something in your heart, don't forget, leave a comment and share your thoughts with us. Subscribe to Snail Story so we can continue sharing more heartfelt stories like this with you, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming love journeys. We'll see you again in the next stories.